is Dylan Steven, and today I want to run you through a quick performance study that my team did specifically for nonprofits. At a high level, 118 Group has access to a lot of Google Analytics accounts for our nonprofit clients, which means we have access to a lot of different data. And so the focus of this study is aggregating some of that data and doing a quick comparison and review of website performance for our different nonprofit client accounts. Our hope with this, the goal with doing something like this, is that we can start to see patterns and trends that we can leverage for future clients or existing clients. So at a really high level, we basically compared 10 of our biggest nonprofit clients' Google Analytics accounts in order to identify trends and patterns in performance. So we started by assigning each of these individual accounts an activity score, 0 to 5. And that was basically based on how often we work with these clients to update their website. It was very subjective. If a client is very active and is always asking for changes to their website or adding new content, they got a 5. If we never hear from them, they got a 0. And then they fall in between somewhere, 0 to 5. So that was one additional metric we added for comparison purposes. And then we also looked at how fresh is each design, and we assigned it a design freshness score, 0 to 5. And that's basically based on when was the last redesign of the website. That was subjective as well, but we had a pretty good pulse on it. So 5 is we just did that website. 0 is we haven't touched that in years. So we're hoping that with the Google Analytics KPIs and our own specific account information, the design freshness score and the activity score, we can start to see how does activity and design recency impact performance. And so we basically then compared these and we reviewed these against some basic KPIs related to user engagement and traffic acquisition. So starting with user engagement, the too long didn't read is that sites with the greatest average number of pages per session are our most active clients. And the inverse is also true. Sites with fewer pages per session are dormant. Are coming from our dormant accounts. So pages per session ultimately means the number of pages a user visited, the average number of pages users visit during their sessions. So you want that number to be higher because it means on average users visit more pages when they come to your site. So if we have our scores down here, let me just minimize myself. If we have our scores down here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is our client activity score. And then the pages per session are on the y-axis. You can clearly see that the more active you are, the more pages per session. There's a lot of reasons that could be, but ultimately I think it's just, you have fresher content, you're spending more time thinking about updates, and you have more going on, so you're adding more to the site, and it just causes people to engage with the site more. So that makes sense to me. The more activity, the more engagement you're getting on with this specific metric. Average time spent. This is also an important one. So this basically says that sites with the greatest average time spent by users are sites that have been recently redesigned or are constantly being updated. So, and then sites with the lowest average time spent by users are our least active clients. So what that looks like, ultimately we have the design freshness factor coming into play. And that's what we mean by, when we go back here, recently redesigned. So obviously you want to have your users spend more time on the site, average time spent, in most cases. In some cases, if you're a municipality or you're just offering information or access, you want a user to come on the site, get what they need and leave. It's a sign of efficiency. But with nonprofits, typically you want them to get to know your story, get to know your team, maybe look at some of your programs, look at some of your events, and that takes time. So you want users to spend time on your site. So we basically, on the bottom here, you have the design freshness score, which is when was the site recently updated, and then you have the average time spent. And you can see that, some variation, but on average, the more recently designed websites have greater time spent on page. And so, that there's a number of reasons for that too, but ultimately I think people are more willing to engage with sites that have more modern designs because they feel because typically the designs are better for users. They're more usable, and they're more interesting. So that's one factor that's another kind of example of activity freshness impacting performance. And then we also saw that bounce rate, sites with the highest bounce rates also seem to have some of the oldest designs. So they had some of the lowest freshness scores. They had a higher bounce rate, which makes sense if we're based on everything else we're saying here. So common flows, this is part of user engagement. We thought it'd be interesting to see typically where do people go from what are the first couple steps users take on our nonprofit websites after landing on the homepage. Obviously the homepage is always the first step, and then it's okay, well, where do they go next? And by far the most common first page after the homepage users visited was the about page. And that makes sense. People want to know about the organization. They want to know about who's leading it, what the mission is, maybe annual reports. They want to see some context. So that makes a lot of sense. And that's a takeaway for us. That's all right. We need to keep the about information kind of prioritized. We saw about, join. Typically, users wanted to take action. They wanted to learn about the company and join, whether that was membership or volunteer or some other way. There was a take action. And then a lot of the times the next step was looking at some of the resources, the articles, and just some more kind of general content that was provided by the nonprofit. We also saw a lot of events being the first click, and then about, and then join, or back to about, news and events. So like I said, the about page was by far the most popular page users visited after landing on the homepage. And users want clear ways to take action. They want to join, they want to go to an event, they want to sign up for a program. They're looking to learn a bit about the organization and do something. So it's important to know that flow. Additional highlights. We also looked at what percentage of users go to the donation page because we consider that to be kind of a micro conversion, visiting the donation page. And we saw that sites highlighting children, veterans, and women had the highest percentage of visits to the donate page. So sites for children, children's welfare, veteran services, women's services, all of that had the highest visits to the donate page. Not much you can action on if you're a nonprofit and that's not in your space, but we thought that was interesting. So then we have traffic acquisition. Again, I'm running through this to try and be efficient. So traffic acquisition, this was how do people get to the site, and we wanted to see how that varied and what that means. So we saw that so for the first kind of test, we plotted the activity score, and then we looked at average monthly users. So how many people are coming to the site, and how does that relate to the client's activity with us as a provider, as a partner. So we saw, you can see here with the graph, that the higher the activity score, typically, till we get towards the end, which could be an aberration in data, the higher we get towards the activity score, the higher the average monthly users go. And that makes sense, for a few reasons. One, when you're constantly adding fresh content to the site, that's good for Google. Google picks that up. Google votes you as being important or a resource, and they bump you up, or they send users your way. So that makes a lot of sense. And then typically, if you're being active with us, you're also being active on social media or in your email newsletter. So activity is a sign of investment, and so the outcomes are pretty interesting. So yeah, I think the skew in data might be that we had a very strong performing client in zone 4 instead of zone 5, and it kind of spiked the data. But this is also an important trend to pay attention to. So and then we looked at acquisition breakdown. So between direct, organic search, referral, and social. And then we looked at what are our average clients, best performing and worst performing clients, and that's in regards to total visits to the site. So our clients with the greatest total visits to the site are considered best performing. Our client with the worst performance on the site, the worst visits, the lowest traffic numbers to the site is the red, the worst performing, and then our average clients in between. And the reason we did this is we wanted to see how, what is the best client doing in terms of their traffic acquisition that is leading to their success. And what we found was if we look at the green here, this is their direct traffic, this is their organic search traffic, this is their referral traffic, and this is their social traffic. And again, this green represents the client we have that has the best traffic numbers out of all the other clients in this review. So the red represents the worst performing client. So they had a ton of direct traffic in relation to, as this is a percentage of their traffic. So they had a high percentage of their traffic coming from direct, a comparable percentage coming from organic search, a little coming from referral, and like no coming from social. And then you have our average, which is somewhere in between. And so what this tells us is that if most of your traffic is direct, well, so one thing is important to know before we get into outcomes is if most of your traffic is direct, people aren't discovering you online. Direct is, I have the URL or I know the URL already. So they're typing in www.nonprofit.com, your URL, which means there's no discovery. This isn't like they're stumbling across it or they're finding you. They already know. So that's not really great for, that means you're not putting yourself in a position to be discovered. Whereas if you're organic search or social, there's more interaction, there's more discovery there. So in this case, they have no social and high direct, which means they're limited because you're not when most of your traffic is coming from direct channels. It means you're probably not in a position to get a lot of new users. You're probably in a position to get the same users over and over again. So because you're clearly not in a position to be discovered. So we found that if most of your traffic is direct, people aren't discovering you online, and that there's a missed opportunity with a lot of our clients on the social side. Like the reason they're in green and they're the best performing client is because they just do a much better job with their social traffic. And so and most of our clients are not active enough in that space, and therefore their website's not seeing enough of that traffic come from social. So something really interesting to think about is the breakdown across channels, and yeah. So ultimately, takeaways. This is going to sound pretty simple and straightforward, but regular investment in your website leads to greater traffic and user engagement. So if your activity score is higher and your design freshness is higher, you're seeing better performance from your website. So if specifically on the nonprofit space, that's what we've looked at so far. So I appreciate your time. If you have any questions on this or you want to talk to me about it, feel free to shoot me an email, dylan@118group.com. And if you like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel.